Welcome back. Today we'll be taking on the second dungeon of the game, the Larai Cliff. This is the Incan themed dungeon of the game, and it's where things start to get a whole lot more complex. There's way more enemies, they're harder to kill, they hit harder, and the path isn't a straight line. So let's start off with the new enemy, the Mudman. They're pretty easy to kill, totally non-threatening, but they're good for demonstrating out the Psycho Dash as a weapon, because they take a lot of damage from it. In fact, as you can see, they took 7, which is more than 3 times what the regular flute swipe did. More than 2 times what the lunge attack did. The disadvantage is, of course, that it takes a little bit to charge up. That said, I'm going to use it anyways, because I've been on a kick of using all the special weapons and powers given to me, ever since I started doing the Mega Man races over in Simon's Thread. Those 4-faced shooting things on the ground give me a little bit of trouble when I try to Psycho Dash them. For some reason, the hit detection's really bizarre. Killing this one gives us a point of defense and reveals an interesting hole in the ground. Now there's a door across those spikes, and there's a diamond-shaped hole in the ground next to them. So I'm willing to bet that we need to find a diamond-shaped object to put in that hole if we want to proceed. One thing that I have to really fault the game on is that sometimes it just puts a ton of enemies for the sake of having enemies and making it more difficult to power up. Those caterpillars are a prime example. That time I was able to actually hit the 4-face thing, but it only did 4 damage. They must have a high defense, or some other multiplier that's taken into account before the damage from Psycho Dash is dealt. Or maybe they just have a special resistance coded in that I'm unaware of. Either way, Psycho Dashing them is generally a bad idea. So of course I'm going to try to do it more to see if I can hit one twice. No dice, but hitting it from the side did 7 damage, unlike the previous Psycho Dash that hit one head-on and only did 4. I have no explanation for it. Thankfully we got an HP increase from clearing out this room because we were pretty low on health. This very slow text scroll tells us that we found the key. Instead of having straight-up locked doors and keys, when Illusion of Gaia doesn't want you going somewhere, they come up with something a little more inventive than a door. In this case, it's the Pit of Spikes, with a diamond-shaped block that's going to drop a bridge down from the ceiling. Honestly, I find that pretty darn cool, and way better than just unlocking a door. These outdoor cliff areas are all connected. They're considered to be the same room by the game, even though you can't access it all from the same place. As a result, we need to make sure we hit every enemy up here, because if we miss any of them, when we eventually reach the bottom of the cliffside fortress, we wouldn't be able to get the power-up. Now, I managed to hit that last 4-face thing twice with the Psycho Dash, which makes me feel pretty proud of myself. Aw, that makes me feel sad. And that makes no sense. Moving on, this room actually isn't where we need to go, but it does have a treasure chest that'll come in handy later. Maybe. We see our good friends the Moai statues again, and since we can't push them with telekinesis, only pull them, our only recourse is to destroy them with the Psycho Dash. Now this guy could be simply pulled out of the way, but I like the Psycho Dash, and I like the explosions it causes, so we're doing it this way. Aha, an herb. Herbs are, of course, healing items, and as I probably mentioned before, there aren't very many of them in the game. Now there's a dark space up there that's going to come into play later, but unfortunately this room turns out to be a dead end for now. Where did we actually need to go? Well, it's not up the path that was created by killing that 4-face thing, that leads back to the beginning. The actual path is between these stones, jumping down here to this door. It's pretty well hidden. It's possible that you'll miss it the first couple times you walk by. I know I did when I was a kid. This hallway is shockingly dangerous. The real kicker is that the Mudman's gonna menace towards you while you're trying not to get shot. Unfortunately, I did get shot there. For just 3 enemies, they're surprisingly dangerous. There's no getting around this. This one has to be Psycho Dashed. And of course, there are some extraneous caterpillars that don't really need to be there to make sure we spend more time in this room than necessary. And here we encounter a new enemy, the slime. The slimes here work a lot like they do in Zelda, except instead of mucking you down and interrupting their movement, they just hurt you. They'll hide underground until you get close, but you can see them on radar. The flying heads are about the only really Incan-themed enemy in the entire place. They're also completely non-threatening and will never hit you. Unfortunately, we'll never hit this one. Unless, of course, he changes into Fred. Or, if the thing that one poster pointed out from the first dungeon, where a perfectly timed lunge attack can somehow get across, if that works, then, well, maybe you don't need to turn into Fred, but I don't think it's going to work there. So we need to find a dark space. Of course, we already found one, but there might be another one closer by. That skeleton holds an interesting and important key to an upcoming puzzle. But what golden statue? We haven't seen anything like that so far. Now that ladder is a trap. All the ladders that appear just let you backtrack. They're not useful. Aha! Golden statues. All at the same time? Well, that's easy. We just have to move these statues around. Of course, if you don't experiment on trying to use telekinesis against everything, you might not realize that you can pull these statues because they aren't conveniently shaped like everything else in the game that you can pull. I definitely might have maybe gotten stuck here as a child, but I'll admit nothing. There's also a good reason why I'm trying not to get too close to the statues, but we'll see that later. Descending down another floor, we see the dark space holy crap! Okay, so stepping on these tiles brings down the thunder from above. And unlike the arrows in the first dungeon, there's actually a chance of being hit. I'll trigger them all just for the sake of completion, but the only ones we need to trigger are this one to form a bridge, and this one to form a bridge, and wait for it, this one to form a bridge. With all that taken care of, we make it to the dark space, where there is conveniently a Fred changing station. Now, not every dark space in a dungeon will have that changing station. In future dungeons, being able to find the right dark space to transform into Fred can be a bit of a hassle. Unfortunately, our path back has been eliminated by virtue of going into the dark space, so we'll have to find a new path. Spoilers, it involves killing everything in sight, and also using Fred's interesting hitbox to hit things that are to his left and definitely not in the path of or even touching his sword. Alright, so we have a path back, but first, no slow crawl for this one, which is shocking considering that it's much more important than that diamond-shaped block. The melody of the wind is very interesting to me because it's basically a remix of the dungeon's own music, and combined with the other legends we've learned about how legends have been passed down through song by the Incas, it kind of makes you think that this song and the dungeon music itself are actually trying to send a message to us. and in fact we'll see that that is the case. Alright, now that we are Fred, we can go back and take out this last head. Killing it drops 5 gems and opens up a ramp so that we can do some sweet tricks. On the other side, of course, there are more enemies. This one drops a giant dark gem that doesn't actually give us any dark power. As you can see, it had a bit of a glowing heart inside of it, and that's because it actually restores our health instead of increasing our dark gem count. Had we taken any damage, we would have been healed by 5. And had we taken any damage after that, we would have been fully healed by the health pickup. These are the same as the statues from before. As you can see, getting too close to them brings them to life. These guys can be pretty dangerous if you don't tackle them one-on-one. So of course you know that at some point, the dungeon's going to make you tackle more than one of them at a time. They have 2 attack patterns. One of them is throwing the spears like that, and the other is slamming the spear into the ground and causing fireballs to move across the ground like the previous one did. The fireball attack is dangerous because, as a ground-based, quote-unquote, projectile, you can't block it with your telekinesis. It actually goes too low for the shiny thing and you get hit. Well, we can't quite make it up that way, so let's go around the long way. Of course, more slimes await. This is yet another case of there just being enemies for the sake of having enemies. But the most egregious example of that is yet to come. No, really, slime, get back here. Having taken the long way around, we can fight off another one of these statue fiends, and find a chest. And in it is another herb. There aren't that many herbs in the game, and I think we have nearly all of them. I believe there's 1 or 2 more. Of course, I could be just making that up or misremembering it. Here they try to get you by keeping the statues close together so that if you walk directly down the middle of the path, they'll both trigger and come to life. But I'm a bit too clever for that. These statues, however, don't come to life. To make them come to life, you have to hit this switch, which activates all of them at once so that you have a fight on your hands. Thanks to some nice abuse of hitboxes, I could stand just 1 tile below them and not get hit by any of their attacks and still be able to stab them to death. This is a useful tactic for bosses, especially if you want to do a perfect run of any of the bosses. This is the last enemy. With this, we can actually access the entire dungeon through the ladder that just appeared, and we get another point of strength. The dungeon's almost over, however, so there's really no need to backtrack unless we wanted to, I don't know, try to find our way back to South Cape. I'm not even certain you can do that right now. In fact, I'm pretty sure you can't. But there are a ton of enemies in this room, so we better get started clearing them out. Now, since we learned a melody earlier, it's a safe bet that we're going to have to transform back into Will at some point and play it. So perhaps our next task should be to go find the dark space that we saw before. Not the one with the room with the spikes, the one that had the statues. Again, we're forced into a 4-on-1 fight here. This one's a lot more dangerous because the statues are set up in such a way that they are surrounding you, and they can immediately attack. My tactic there was supposed to be to immediately get out of the circle and then take them on one at a time. It didn't quite work. I find the slimes in the middle of this section to be a bit of a dick move, because it forces a little bit of backtracking. Of course it's not much. but it's enough to make me kinda sad. That time the health power-up was of much use, since we took quite a few hits during the fight with the statues. Of course, after getting the health power-up, we get a permanent health power-up. We could go down, but I have it on good authority that we can't do anything down there yet. Going up, however, brings us back to the dark space we saw earlier. I really like that particular clue because it means that the entire music of the dungeon and the melody that we got are basically remixes of a puzzle clue. I personally find that very cool. Another point of strength means that we are going to be dishing out the damage to everything that's not a boss. And collecting that red jewel means that I'm a happy camper. Since you can't backtrack to any of the dungeons, missing any red jewels is, in fact, the leading cause of hitting the reset button. Alright, now that we've transformed back into Will, let's save, and go back to that path we skipped, and see what's there. Enemies don't respawn unless you die. But even if the enemies do respawn, any power-ups that you've gotten will remain acquired. This certainly is a golden room. That's a lot of switches. Since there's no clues other than the ones we already have, let's go ahead and play the Melody of the Wind. Fortunately, playing the Melody of the Wind tells us exactly where to stand in order to proceed. Except it doesn't seem to be working. Why isn't it working? It's not working because it's another puzzle where the solution is to stand around and wait. Oh, how I love those. That's a lie, I don't love those. Note that our hair is not blowing. That means we finally reached the cliff where the spirit's breath does not reach. And also it's pretty clear that those altars are meant to hold the statues that we collected from the Moon Tribe and Ittery Village. So let's go ahead and place them there. Doing so triggers my favorite sound effect in existence. Alright, maybe not my favorite. It's second to Punch Donkey, but it's up there. And it also signifies that it's time to go fight a boss. We should always be Fred for boss fights. Why should we always be Fred for boss fights? Well, Gaia wasn't very helpful on that particular count, but it's because they all have 40 HP, and Frieden always does 2 damage to them, whereas Will only does 1 damage to them per hit. So it's a matter of having the number of hits that it takes to kill the boss, making Fred the clear choice. The first boss is named Kastoth. Other than vaguely resembling an Incan sacrificial tool, he has nothing to do with Incan mythology. We have 5 strength, 6 defense, 13 health. Seems pretty good. So let's get him. Kastoth starts out being completely invincible. To make him vulnerable, we need to slash at each of his hands. To make his hands vulnerable, we need to stand in front of them, while he launches these pyramid things with fireballs around them, and more fireballs heading out the walls. and he has one more attack that we'll see after we damage him. The key to beating Castoff is to realize that he is very predictable. His I-beams that Gaia told us about can't reach behind him, and if we don't stand all the way behind him, then he can't fire at us. Can't fire at us from a sideways angle anyways. There is a slight pattern to how Castoff works. If you hit him in mid-stride, or rather mid-flying projectile thing, he won't immediately become vulnerable. But he will always become vulnerable if he has no hands and fires one of those flying things at a 45-degree angle, after it bounces off the lower right and lower left-hand corners. He's easily defeated. And having done so, we transform back into Will. Of course, while he wasn't the easiest boss in the world, I'm pretty sure I can make him look a little bit easier. So stay tuned for that. Sweet talking flute Jesus, what is that? I think Will has it right. I think we've got ourselves an Incan gold ship. And I bet somewhere on it is a mystic statue. But we'll find out next time.